PlayStation 3 was a fun time, a time with many memories. Here are some. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 things only PS3 owners will understand. Coming in at number 10, the constant updates of your console. Let's say you want to play PlayStation 3 on the weekend. This is, I think, probably your key gripe. There was an update awaiting. Oh boy, did they update this console every single opportunity they possibly could. Not that that's terrible, but like, when it took the amount of time that it did in order to update it, it isn't as good as it could be. And that's putting it in the nicest way I possibly can. If we go ahead and say, like, I had a whole week to wait until my actual time was clear to play a game, to enjoy myself, and now that we're at that point, I gotta wait for you to update my console, it was easy to get really annoyed by this one. Coming in at number 9, another wonderful gripe, PlayStation Home. But not just PlayStation Home, because yes, PlayStation Home itself, the virtual 3D social gaming platform, wasn't like an amazing thing, but it also wasn't like a huge problem by itself. However, the amount of times that I wanted to go to PlayStation Store and instead pressed PlayStation Home and waited for PlayStation Home to load is probably not countable. It happened so many times during the time that I used PlayStation 3. And I don't mean like, hey, I eventually figured it out and got used to it and didn't do it anymore. I mean like, from start to finish, the entire life cycle of the console, I did this dumb thing with. And I know I'm not the only person who did. There's no chance. It was too easy. I promise if you had a PlayStation 3, at some point you did this. Coming in at number 8, the worst port of the console generation, Skyrim. Oh my lord. Clearly, the Xbox was given the priority with Skyrim as they created this game, because it was the version that ran correctly. The PlayStation 3 version, on the other hand, did not really know what it was doing. It had to do with the way the system architecture for PlayStation 3 didn't share RAM. It cordoned off its RAM, and the Xbox did the opposite. Both of them do it, I guess, the right way now. The Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, but still, in this console generation, it wasn't just the RAM either. It was probably had something to do with the cell architecture, the ridiculous thing that they decided they were going to make for the PlayStation 3, this amazing labyrinth that you had to learn your way around in order to make a game on the platform. Yeah, nobody liked developing for it, and the Skyrim team that ported it flat out just opted out of even caring, I guess. Number 7, finally something positive. The birth of Uncharted. Uncharted was a phenomenal series that is still technically going. I don't think Nathan Drake is still going to be the main character, but we did see another title in the series after Uncharted 4, and it was actually quite good. But it's also hard to imagine the feeling that almost everybody had when the series first started. It was like, this is something different. It's not that the art style was somehow distinguished from other games. In fact, it's just some guy with regular hair and a shirt. And I know anybody who knows what Nathan Drake looks like is like, yeah, that's a good description. But his adventure was such a different and yet familiar and yet scaled way the hell up experience. It was just really cool. It was one of those things you knew would be a series, like, immediately. As soon as you got a little ways into the game, you were like, yeah, they're going to do as many of these as they possibly can. And thankfully, they kept getting better. Coming in at number 6, the obsession with platinum trophies. The platinum trophies would usually be like a last get, you did the hardest thing or completed 100% of the game type trophy. And you could easily liken this to like the kind of completionist type game player. It's just PlayStation used language that worked really well. Platinum trophy just sounds awesome. I will get all of the platinum trophies I can, yes. It's easy to get why people got into that. And in truth, it got a lot of people to play games a lot longer than you would expect. So it worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. Coming in at number 5, the 6-axis controller and its total lack of rumble. In fact, it wasn't just that it didn't have rumble in it, it was that Sony said it was so 2000 and late, so to speak. They actually said the 6-axis controller offers game designers and developers far more opportunity for future innovation. Now, rumble, I think, was the last generation feature. It's not the next generation feature. I think motion sensitivity is. Oops. Sure, yeah, if you bought a Wii, yes, absolutely, that's what people wanted. But they bought a Wii for that. They did not buy a PlayStation for that. They bought it because it was a traditional game console, and Rumble became a standard thing in the previous generation. So, way to read the room, man. Yeah, they had to change that. I don't know, they really didn't know how to handle the press back then because it was just like savaging the response that they got over this. It was just, no, absolutely not, never. You are so full of crap. How could you possibly think this? And they had to do another DualShock. It did not take them long either. Number 4, if you remember, the PlayStation 3 was absolutely full of amazing exclusives. Though PlayStation 4 had God of War 4, PlayStation 3 had God of War 3, and God of War 3 was great. But it also had Demon's Souls and Last of Us and the Metal Gear Solid series for the most part. And let's not pretend that Gran Turismo, the multiple Gran Turismo games that came out during that generation, don't deserve a mention here. They were just technically stunning for the time. But we had the Little Big Planet games, which allowed you to do much more than they ever appeared to. And I'm not going to let you forget the Yakuza games or the Ratchet & Clank games. Neither should we forget the Resistance games, which, although maybe didn't look as good as the E3 demos, were incredibly fun games for the most part. But I am going to let you forget Calling All Cars. I don't even remember what that was. Coming in at number 3, Sony deciding that Linux just shouldn't be on the PlayStation 3. They did this other OS thing where you could install Linux on the PlayStation 3, and in truth, it was like a great idea to allow the homebrew community to develop games for the thing. However, Sony removed it in the 3.21 firmware on April 1st, 2010 because of security concerns. Although I would say it was because they thought people would pirate stuff, and I think people were pirating stuff to be completely fair, but people would be doing that anyway. And basically taking a big dump on the homebrew community, which was like super stoked for the PlayStation 3 because it was like the first console to officially be like, yeah, you're going to be able to use this thing for that. And because of this, a class action lawsuit was actually filed for false advertising. It eventually ended in a settlement where if you had it, you could get $55, which is not a lot, but I mean, if you consider how many people had an other OS PlayStation, that's a lot of $55 payouts. Coming in at number 2, if you remember the PlayStation 3, you remember spending more than 3 minutes installing games. Yes, installing a game took forever. If you put a game on your hard drive, and let's just be clear, some games actually required it, it would take a very long time. This doesn't matter whether it was a game you downloaded off the PlayStation Store or if you put in a disc with the game and you were like, install, thank you. No, it was nothing like today where you can download a game on PlayStation 4 and start it almost immediately. It seems like they've got that process ironed out much, much more than they did back here. And finally, coming in at number 1, if you are a PlayStation 3 survivor, you'll remember the PlayStation Network outage of 2011. The outage was a result of Sony basically just stopping everything because there was an external intrusion on the PlayStation Network and the Quirosity services, which I'm sure this mainly concerned people using the PlayStation Network, because I mean all 5 people using Quirosity probably weren't that inconvenienced. I'll just say I wasn't spending a large amount of my time logging into the PlayStation Network for that. But anyway, the attack occurred between April 17th and April 19th, 2011, and Sony just shut PSN off on April 20th. On May 4th, Sony had to admit that personal information from all 77 million accounts on the PlayStation Network had been exposed to the intrusion, which isn't that cool. Nobody's really stoked about that. I mean, they already weren't playing any online games for a long time, and finding that out wasn't super awesome, let's just say. Sony definitely learned a big lesson from this. First, it's shut it off, like, earlier in the intrusion. I understand, like, it's going to inconvenience people, but getting their personal information of all 77 million customers out to hackers is much more inconvenient, let me tell you. And also tell people what's going on. We didn't hear about it until a couple days after the attack started, so yeah, I remember that. And a quick bonus point for you. Do you remember that time when the PlayStation 3 had backwards compatibility? Like, for a very brief time at launch, you could put a PlayStation 2 game in it and play the PlayStation 2 game. Now, the reason why it was backwards compatible was because they actually put the PlayStation 2 hardware into the PlayStation 3. Or at least some approximation of it. It's not exactly the same thing, but it played the games. And on later models, they did not do that. Now, the reason they didn't do that is because they wanted to lower the cost of the console, which, to be fair, is a good reason not to include backwards compatibility, but it was certainly a sore spot for a lot of people who had to buy another PlayStation 3 for whatever reason. I am one of those people. Yeah, it sucks, doesn't it? What do you remember about the PlayStation 3 days? Leave us a comment, and if you like this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first was, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanx.